how I ended the cycling. I actually think that the cycling would have gone on many more times than 5 if it didn't end. It just seems that there were these breakups, and then time would go by and she would reach out, even though I did do a reverse Hoover 2 out of the 5 times, and I had my own reasons, and I was actually glad that I did. I'll maybe talk more about that later, but you know, I did have the opportunity to go through a 6 cycle, and that didn't end up happening. And to summarize it, this video could have been short, but I have like a longer story to tell. But to summarize it, I had 3 requests I made of her. And if you've seen the video I made on the promiscuity that I witnessed, my first request was that she get an STD test and show me. And that alone caused her to not want to come back anymore, even though initially she did. And so here's like the story, the longest story about, you know, what happened after at the end of the last cycle, the 5th that I went through, and then her 6th Hoover attempt. So quickly, during the last few days that I was with her in the 5th cycle, it lasted 3 months, and so it was like actually our longest. It was actually our longest, and in my opinion, our best time we had together. It almost made it worthwhile, because I'm not looking for the one, really. It was nice just to have a girlfriend, you know, but I wasn't thinking terribly long into the future, and I enjoyed her company, so there's that. But so in the last few days we were together, she cut herself. And I don't think she had cut herself at all in the entire time I knew her, other than this one time. And it was a pretty serious deep cut on her lower leg. And I asked her why she did it, because I was at work all day, and you know, the last time we were together it was fine. She's like, she gave me this answer. She said, it's either she's like, I was just going crazy, and it was either I cut myself or I get into my car and drive really fast and wreck it. And I was like, wow, never experienced anybody who said something like that before. But you know, I'll emphasize this point, that nothing was going wrong in our relationship in those last few days. In terms of her and I, it's just something that subconsciously triggers in them, and I had already seen it before, and so I wasn't surprised that the expiration date was coming close, because I'd been with her 3 months, and she often could only last a month or 2 months previously. And so, you know, the shock, I was expecting her to leave. We had our good time, and yeah, just to continue on here, so a few days after cutting herself, things seemed to settle down, and you know, I thought maybe the relationship would last another few weeks or a month or whatever. But on our very last meeting that I had with her, I went across the street. She was my neighbor. People know that by now. She was visibly upset and rocking back and forth, and didn't want to be touched at all, when she usually always wanted to be touched. And so I did not touch her after she expressed that to me. And then I went home, and she left me a long breakup text after late at night, in a time where I'd be asleep and in bed. And in the morning I woke up and I replied to her, and then she replied back to me, "Leave me alone. I don't want anything to do with you." Now, if 2 neurotypical people, if one of them texts that to the other, that usually means you're never going to speak again, and that your relationship is over. But I kind of grown accustomed to that type of texting at the end of every cycle. And then eventually she would find her way back, or I would reverse Hoover and she would be totally open to it. It's just a very strange dynamic. I've never had to deal with this with anybody else in my life ever. So yeah, so 4 months after that long breakup text went by, and of course, people know from the previous video, I was her neighbor, witnessed many of her hookups in that 4 months. And then she chimes in suddenly. I had not heard. We caught glimpses of each other because we lived so close. We never said anything. But then she texts me. She chimes in one night, "Hey," with a one-word text. Now, in my opinion, that is not a normal human behavior to, after all the things we've been through, her wanting me to be the father of her child, and to just show up out of the blue with a "hey" text. The "hey" text is like, "Hey, come back into my life completely." I already have received those types of texts from her. And if I gave her a lengthy reply and was open to hanging out again, we would be on again for months. But this time, and she sent that text, by the way, via a service where you can tell if the other person looks at it. And so I did look at it within about 10 minutes, but I did not reply for 2 weeks because I was just fed up. I'd seen enough of her little hookups and all that, like I always have. And I was just actually kind of tired of it. But of course, on that very night, she sent the "hey" text, and I did not reply, even though she saw that I had seen it. That very night, not a few hours later, some strange guy came over. She did a little making out in the street. I've never seen her do that before. And then invited him back in her house, and he was in her house for 2 hours. So we all know what went on. It was that, turn the page here. It was that self-soothing, of the abandonment anxiety that she had over my seeing her text and not replying, and she needed to immediately soothe that anxiety with sex with a stranger, because I've never seen this guy before and never seen his car ever again. So, I guess, she showed me, didn't she? So I did end up replying to her 2 weeks later with an even shorter one-worder. You got to fight fire with fire sometimes. I just replied, "Yo." And then she immediately replied to that, and then we were cordial via texts for several days. And I was just trying to stay on text terms with her, just because it was just awkward seeing her car every day and seeing her once in a while and her seeing me. I just wanted to hey, maybe we could just wish each other well and then leave it at that. And that would even be better than the way it ended. But then she initiated intimacy with me by inviting me over and requesting certain services. And to make a long story short, that's when I made my 3 requests, though I only got to give her that first one. She lost her temper after me suggesting that she get an STD test, and said, "Oh, I was just in a moment of weakness, and I just really, I can't ever imagine really ever being around you again." See, if I would have just played it cool, I could have gone back there, could have got some of that hot stuff, But yeah, I had 3 strong. The way I got out of the cycling, basically, I had 3 strong things that I needed her to address, and I totally would have got back with her. Like I said, I don't date at all. I'm not looking for anybody. But she was very fun to be around, and was convenient. It was across the street, and so yeah, I guess I had formed some boundaries and formed some kind of request, and she just wouldn't even want to hear it. And then she did the little break off test text to me and then blocked me completely, and that's okay. You know, she didn't want to hear any of my requests, and so, that's life.